When everyone thought William Morrison was just a quiet factory worker from Oklahoma, his daughter Andrea thought she knew everything about him. But standing in that grocery store, staring at her phone as her husband abandoned her for another woman, Andrea had no idea that the father she'd just buried had left her billions, and a warning about the man she'd married. Andrea's hand trembled as she read the text one more time, her father's funeral program still clutched in her other hand. "I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. It's over. I'm with Valerie now." She'd buried her father just 3 days ago, and now Marcus, the man who'd promised to love her through everything, disability and all, was walking out on her while she was 7 months pregnant with their second child. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife, but what Andrea didn't know yet was that her father had seen this coming. Before he died, William Morrison had left her something that would change everything, an envelope with a red wax seal, a safe deposit box key, and the truth about who he really was, a secret billionaire who'd spent his entire life protecting her from moments exactly like this. This wasn't just a story about betrayal. This was the beginning of Andrea discovering that the real inheritance her father left her had nothing to do with money, and everything to do with the strength she'd always had but never knew she needed. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I've missed you all so much. It's been a tough ride with some technical issues, but by God's grace we're getting everything back on track. Thank you for sticking with me. Your support means everything. Before we begin, I want to say a little prayer over everyone watching, especially the women. To the women, may God strengthen you, comfort you, and fill your heart with peace and favor. To the men, may God guide you, bless your efforts, and give you wisdom in all you do. And may God's protection rest on every single one of you. Amen. If you're ready for today's story, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My USA and UK family, I see you. And please watch till the end, because tomorrow I'll be dropping another story you wouldn't want to miss. Now, let's get into the story. Andrea's hands shook as she fumbled with her house keys, the grocery bags forgotten in the car. Bella pressed close to her side, her small fingers gripping Andrea's jacket with a kind of desperation only a child who senses something deeply wrong can muster. The front door swung open to reveal their home, the same home where Marcus had kissed her goodbye that morning, where he'd promised to pick up his dry cleaning, where he'd acted like everything was normal. Except nothing had been normal for weeks, maybe months. Andrea sank onto the living room couch, her disability making every movement feel heavier than usual. Her left leg throbbed, the constant reminder of the car accident 3 years ago that had changed everything. She pulled out her phone and read Marcus's text again, as if the words might somehow rearrange themselves into something less devastating. "I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. It's over. I'm with Valerie now." Valerie. The name tasted like poison in her mouth. Valerie from Marcus's office. Valerie who'd sent a sympathy card when her father died. Valerie who'd smiled at Andrea at the company Christmas party just 4 months ago, all while sleeping with her husband. "Mom!" Bella's voice cut through the fog. "Are you crying?" Andrea hadn't even realized the tears were falling. She wiped her face quickly, trying to compose herself, but it was useless. The dam had broken. "Come here, baby," Andrea whispered, pulling her daughter close. Bella climbed onto the couch, wrapping her thin arms around her mother's neck. At 6 years old, she was too young to understand betrayal, but old enough to know when her world was shifting beneath her feet. Andrea's mind drifted backward, grasping for the moments when things had made sense. 7 years ago, Marcus Jackson had walked into the community center where Andrea volunteered, all confident smiles and easy charm. He'd been organizing a charity basketball tournament, and Andrea had been managing the registration table. "You've got the most beautiful smile I've ever seen," he'd told her, and she'd laughed, thinking he was just another smooth talker. But Marcus had been persistent. He'd ask her for coffee, then dinner, then to meet his mother. Within a year, they were married in a small ceremony at her father's church, with William Morrison walking her down the aisle, his eyes glistening with pride and something else Andrea couldn't quite name at the time. "Fear, maybe, oh, warning. You sure about this one? Andy," her father had asked the night before the wedding, using his nickname for her. They'd been sitting on his porch in their modest neighborhood, the same porch where he'd taught her to read, to dream, to believe she deserved good things. "I'm sure, Daddy," she'd said, squeezing his callous hand. "Marcus makes me happy." William had nodded slowly, his jaw tight. Just remember, a man who truly loves you will prove it when things get hard, not just when they're easy. The accident had happened 2 years into their marriage. A drunk driver, a rainy night, Andrea's car spinning across 3 lanes of traffic. She'd survived, but her left leg hadn't fully recovered. The doctors said she'd walk again, but it would never be the same. She'd need a cane, physical therapy, pain management for the rest of her life. Marcus had seemed supportive at first. He'd driven her to appointments, helped her with exercises, told her she was still beautiful. But gradually, Andrea had noticed a change. The way he'd flinch when she reached for him, the late nights at the office that became more frequent, the distance in his eyes when he looked at her. "I'm trying my best." He'd snapped one night when she'd asked him to help her up the stairs. "This isn't what I signed up for, Andrea." She'd told herself it was just stress, that he was tired, that things would get better. Then she got him pregnant with their second child, and Marcus had gone silent for 3 days before finally saying, "Okay, we'll figure it out." Not "I'm so happy." Not "we're having another baby." Just "we'll figure it out," like she was a problem to be solved rather than his wife. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. "I'll come by tomorrow to get my things. This isn't about you. I just need to be happy." Andrea stared at the words until they blurred. This isn't about you. How could it not be about her? She was his wife, the mother of his children, including the one currently growing inside her. She'd supported his career, his dreams, his ambitions, even when her own body was screaming in pain. "Mom, why is Dad texting you so much?" Bella asked, her voice small. Andrea set the phone down, face down on the coffee table like she could make the messages disappear. "Your dad he's having a hard time right now, sweetheart." "Is it because of Grandpa?" The mention of her father sent a fresh wave of grief crashing over Andrea. William Morrison had died just 3 days ago, a massive heart attack that took him before the ambulance even arrived. Andrea had held his hand in the hospital, watching machines confirm what she already knew. Her father, her rock, her constant source of unconditional love, was gone, and now Marcus was gone too. "Yeah, baby." Andrea lied, because what else could she say? "It's because of Grandpa." Bella seemed to accept this, resting her head on Andrea's shoulder. They sat in silence, the afternoon light streaming through the windows, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air like tiny ghosts of happiness past. Andrea's eyes drifted to the bookshelf across the room, where a framed photo sat between her father's worn Bible and a collection of Marcus's basketball trophies. It was from their wedding day, Marcus in his sharp gray suit, Andrea in her simple white dress, both of them laughing at something the photographer had said. Marcus's hand rested on her waist, possessive and proud. Andrea's eyes sparkled with hope and trust. She stood slowly, wincing as her leg protested, and crossed the room to pick up the frame. She studied Marcus's face, searching for any sign of the man who would abandon her 7 years later. Had it all been a performance? Had he ever really loved her, or had she just been convenient? Pretty enough to show off, helpful enough to support his ambitions, damaged enough, after the accident, to eventually discard? "Did you ever really love me?" Andrea whispered to the photograph, her thumb tracing the glass over Marcus's smile. The photo offered no answers, just frozen smiles and broken promises captured in a moment that felt like it belonged to someone else's life entirely. Behind her, Bella hummed a tune their father used to sing, something old and gospel that William would belt out while cooking Sunday dinner. The sound broke something in Andrea's chest, and she set the photo down before she could throw it across the room. 3 days. Her father had been gone for 3 days, and Marcus couldn't even wait a week to destroy what was left of her world. The drive to Ponca City felt like traveling through a memory. Andrea had made this trip countless times as a child, riding in her father's old Ford pickup, windows down, gospel music crackling through the speakers. Now she drove alone, Bella safely with her grandmother in D.C., the silence in the car so heavy it felt like a passenger. William Morrison's house sat on a quiet street lined with modest homes and ancient oak trees. It looked exactly as it always had, small, tidy, unremarkable. The kind of place where a factory worker might live. The kind of place where a man who clipped coupons and wore the same 3 pairs of work boots for 20 years would feel at home. Andrea's key still worked in the front door. The familiar scent hit her immediately: Old Spice aftershave, coffee, and the faint vanilla smell of the candles her father burned during his evening prayers. She stood in the doorway, her cane supporting her weight, and let the grief wash over her one more time. "I miss you, Daddy," she whispered to the empty rooms. The funeral arrangements had been surprisingly simple. Her father had already paid for everything: the casket, the plot, even the flowers. "Always planning ahead," the funeral director had said, shaking his head with admiration. At the time, Andrea had thought it was just her father being practical. Now, walking through his home, she wondered what else he'd planned. His study was exactly as he'd left it. The desk, scarred oak that had belonged to his own father, sat beneath the window. Stacks of papers covered its surface: bills marked paid, church newsletters, handwritten Bible verses on index cards. Andrea sank into his chair and began sorting through the mess, looking for important documents, insurance policies, anything that needed handling. That's when she saw it. Tucked beneath a leather-bound Bible was an envelope, thick, cream-colored paper. Her name written in her father's careful script, Andrea, and sealed with dark red wax, pressed with what looked like an old family crest she'd never seen before. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. Inside were two things: a small brass key attached to a tag reading First National Bank, Safety Deposit Box 847, and a letter in her father's handwriting. Andrea unfolded the paper, her eyes already filling with tears before she read the first word. "My dearest Andy, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I pray you're not reading it too soon. There are things I need to tell you, things I've kept from you your whole life, not out of shame, but out of love. I am not the man you think I am. Or rather, I am exactly that man, but I am also something more. The factory job, this small house, the clipped coupons, that was all real. That was the life I chose to give you. But it wasn't the only life I had. I own Marlin Mansion. I own Morrison Industries. I own properties in 7 states and investments worth more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I am, by any definition, a very wealthy man. And I never told you. I know you're probably angry right now, confused, maybe even hurt. But Andy, I did this to protect you. I've seen what money does to people. I've watched it poison families, destroy marriages, turn children into vultures circling their parents' deathbeds. I wanted you to grow up knowing your worth had nothing to do with a bank account. I wanted you to marry for love, not money. I wanted you to understand hard work, sacrifice, and dignity. The key in this envelope opens a safety deposit box at First National. Inside, you'll find documents establishing a trust in your name. The money is yours. The properties are yours. All of it. I've structured it so that no one, and I mean no one, can touch it but you. I've also left you instructions and the contact information for my attorney, Richard Caldwell. He's known about this for years and will help you navigate everything. Be strong, my girl. Stronger than you've ever been. The world will change around you now, but don't let it change who you are. You are my daughter. That's worth more than all the mansions and money combined. With all my love, Daddy. Andrea read the letter 3 times, then a 4th. Her father's word blurred and sharpened, as her brain struggled to process what she was seeing. Marlin Mansion. She knew that name. Everyone in Oklahoma knew that name. It was a historical landmark, a palatial estate built during the oil boom, with 55 rooms and grounds that sprawled across acres. It was the kind of place featured in magazines and history books. And her father owned it. Her father, who'd driven a 15-year-old truck, who'd shopped at thrift stores, who'd eaten leftovers for 3 days rather than waste food. That man was a billionaire. Andrea's hand moved to the small brass key, turning it over in her palm. The metal was warm, almost alive. This tiny object was a key to a life she'd never imagined, a future her father had been quietly building while she struggled to pay her own bills. She looked around the modest study, at the worn carpet, the second-hand desk, the simple cross hanging on the wall, and suddenly understood. This wasn't deprivation. This was love. Her father had given her something more valuable than money. He'd given her authenticity, humility, and the strength to survive without needing anyone's fortune. And now, when she needed it most, when Marcus had abandoned her, when she was broken and pregnant and alone. Her father's final gift would catch her before she fell. Andrea pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. You really did plan for everything, didn't you, Daddy? The First National Bank of Ponca City looked like it had been standing since Oklahoma became a state. Andrea climbed the stone steps slowly, her cane clicking against marble worn smooth by a century of footsteps. The brass key felt impossibly heavy in her coat pocket. Inside, the bank was all polished wood and hushed voices. Andrea approached the desk, her heart hammering so hard she thought the teller might hear it. I need to access a safety deposit box, she said, sliding the key across the counter. Number 847. The woman, middle-aged, with kind eyes, looked at the key, then at Andrea, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. Right this way, Mrs. Jackson. Andrea followed her into the vault, a room that smelled like old paper and secrets. The teller inserted her master key alongside Andrea's, turned them in unison, and pulled out a long metal box. She set it on the table in the private viewing room and quietly left, closing the door behind her. For a moment, Andrea just stared at the box. Once she opened it, everything would change. The father she'd known her entire life would become someone else. Her understanding of her childhood, her struggles, her identity, all of it would shift. She lifted the lid. Inside were folders. Lots of them. Each one labeled in her father's precise handwriting, Marlin Mansion deed, Morrison Industries, shareholder documents, investment portfolio, trust agreement, real estate holdings. Letter to Andrea, read first. Andrea's hands shook as she pulled out the letter marked for her. This one was longer, typed on official letterhead, Morrison Family Trust. My dearest Andrea, if you're reading this second letter, you've made it to the bank. I'm proud of you. I know this must feel overwhelming, maybe even like a betrayal. Why didn't your old man tell you the truth? I've asked myself that question 1,000 times over the years. The answer is simple and complicated all at once. I wanted you to know who you were before the world told you who you should be. When I built Morrison Industries from nothing, I watched money change people I loved. My own brothers stopped speaking to me over inheritance disputes. Friends I'd known since childhood suddenly needed loans they'd never repay. Women pursued me not for love, but for security. Everyone wanted something. I couldn't let that happen to you, Andy. I couldn't let you grow up wondering if people loved you or loved what you could give them. So I made a choice. I lived modestly. I worked an honest job at the factory I actually owned. I taught you the value of a dollar earned, not inherited, and I watched you become exactly the woman I hoped you'd be. Strong, compassionate, real. Now, about the trust. I've structured it so that only you have access. No spouse, no creditor, no one can touch what's yours. I did this because I know men, Andrea. I know how some of them think. I know that money can make people stay for the wrong reasons, or leave when they think there's nothing to gain. If Marcus is reading this over your shoulder, he should know, you don't need him. You never did. The trust is worth approximately $3.2 billion. You own Marlin Mansion outright, along with 12 other properties. Morrison Industries generates $47 million annually in passive income. There are stocks, bonds, and investments that will continue growing. You're set for life. Andy, so is Bella, so is that baby you're carrying. But more importantly, you're strong enough to handle this. I made sure of that by raising you the way I did. My attorney, Richard Caldwell, has known about this arrangement since you were born. He'll help you navigate everything. Trust him like you trusted me. Don't let the money change who you are. Use it to build the life you deserve, to protect your children, to do good in this world. That's all I ever wanted. I love you more than all the mansions and million combined. Always, Dad. Andrea set the letter down and opened the trust documents. Her father hadn't been exaggerating. The numbers were staggering. Properties listed across multiple states. Investment accounts with balances that made her dizzy. And at the center of it all, an irrevocable trust with her name, and only her name, as the sole beneficiary. Marcus couldn't touch a penny of it, even if they were still married. Even if he came crawling back, the trust was structured to protect her completely. Andrea thought about Marcus's text. I can't do this anymore. She almost laughed. He'd left her thinking she was broken, helpless, financially dependent. He'd abandoned her assuming she'd have no choice but to struggle as a disabled single mother working whatever job she could find. He had no idea that while he was building a life with Valerie, Andrea had become one of the wealthiest women in Oklahoma. But the realization didn't feel like victory. It felt hollow, because money couldn't undo the betrayal. It couldn't make Marcus love her. It couldn't bring her father back. What it could do was give her choices. Andrea gathered the documents carefully, placing them back in the box. Her reflection caught in the polished metal, tired eyes, grief etched into every line of her face. But something else too. Something harder. Stronger. She thought of Bella waiting at home, asking when Daddy was coming back. She thought of the baby growing inside her, innocent and unaware that their father had already chosen another life. "We don't need him," Andrea whispered to her reflection, echoing her father's words. "We never did." She closed the box with a soft click that sounded like a door closing on her old life and opening on something entirely new. Marcus showed up on Thursday afternoon, exactly when he said he would. Andrea watched from the living room window as his car pulled into the driveway, not his usual sedan, but a newer model. Valerie's, probably. She'd spent the last 2 days meeting with Richard Caldwell, her father's attorney, signing documents and learning the full scope of her inheritance. She'd walked through Marlin Mansion's empty halls, stood in rooms larger than her entire current house, and felt the weight of her father's legacy settle on her shoulders. But she hadn't told Marcus. Hadn't told anyone except the attorney. The doorbell rang. Andrea took a breath, steadied herself with her cane, and opened the door. Marcus stood on the porch holding 2 boxes, looking uncomfortable. He'd lost weight, she noticed. Or maybe guilt just made him look smaller. "Hey," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "I came to get my stuff. Is Bella here?" "She's with my mother." Andrea stepped aside, letting him enter. "Come in." He moved past her into the living room, setting the boxes down near the bookshelf where his basketball trophies still sat today. The awkward silence stretched between them like a chasm. "Andrea, listen." Marcus turned to face her, and she saw it immediately, the rehearsed expression, the calculated softness in his voice. "I've been thinking. Maybe I was too hasty. Maybe we can work this out." Andrea leaned against the doorframe, studying him. 2 weeks ago, these words would have shattered her, would have made her beg him to stay, promise to be better, easier, less broken. Now they just sounded pathetic. Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to that intimate tone he used to use when they were happy. "Us, our family. I made a mistake. Andrea. I was stressed, overwhelmed with your dad dying in the pregnancy and my disability." Andrea finished for him. "Let's not pretend that wasn't part of it." He flinched. "That's not fair. You texted me that you were leaving me for another woman 3 days after I buried my father." Andrea's voice was steady, almost clinical. "While I'm 7 months pregnant, after 8 years of marriage. What part of that is fair, Marcus?" I know. He ran his hand over his face, the picture of remorse. "I was an idiot, but we can get past this. For Bella, for the baby." Andrea watched him carefully. The pleading eyes, the vulnerable posture. She'd seen this performance before. Whenever he wanted something, he knew exactly how to play the role of the repentant husband. "What happened with Valerie?" she asked. Marcus's jaw tightened. It's complicated." "Let me guess. She wasn't what you thought? Or maybe she mentioned that supporting someone else's pregnant wife isn't as appealing as being the mistress." "Andrea, answer the question." "We had a disagreement," Marcus admitted. "About logistics. About what happens next." There it was. Andrea saw it clearly now. Marcus hadn't come back because he loved her. He'd come back because his backup plan had fallen through. Because Valerie had probably realized that dating a man who abandoned his disabled pregnant wife didn't look good at dinner parties. "So you thought you'd just come back here," Andrea said softly. "Apologize, and I'd be so grateful, so relieved, that I'd take you back without question." "That's not." "Because that's what I would have done, isn't it?" Andrea continued, her voice growing stronger. 2 weeks ago, if you'd shown up like this, I would have forgiven you. I would have convinced myself that this was just a rough patch, that we could work through it, that I needed you. Marcus's expression shifted, sensing something different in her tone. Andrea, what are you? I don't need you, Marcus. The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced. Come on, Andrea, be realistic. You can't work full-time with your leg. You've got Bella and a baby on the way. Your dad's gone. You're going to need help. I'm worth $3.2 billion. The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. What? My father was a billionaire, Andrea said calmly. He owned Morrison Industries, Marlin Mansion, properties in 7 states. He set up an irrevocable trust in my name before he died, a trust that you have absolutely no legal access to, whether we're married or not. Marcus stared at her, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and finally something uglier. Anger. You're lying. I have the documents if you'd like to see them. Your dad worked in a factory. He lived in a tiny house. By choice. Andrea smiled, and it wasn't kind. He wanted me to grow up knowing my worth had nothing to do with money. Turns out, he also wanted to make sure I married someone who loved me for me, not for what I could give them. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. This is insane. You've changed. You're not the woman I married. No, Andrea agreed. I'm not. The woman you married would have begged you to stay, would have blamed herself for your affair, would have believed she was too broken, too damaged, too much of a burden. She took a step forward, her cane firm against the floor. But that woman died when you sent that text. And the woman standing here now, she doesn't need you. She doesn't want you. And she definitely doesn't forgive you. Marcus's face had gone red. You think money makes you better than me now? No. I think choosing Valerie over your family makes you exactly who you are. The money just means I don't have to pretend anymore that you're worth keeping. You'll regret this, Marcus said, his voice tight with rage. When you're alone, struggling, trying to raise 2 kids by yourself. I'll be in a 55-room mansion, Andrea interrupted, living off $4 to $7 million a year in passive income. Somehow, I think I'll manage. For a long moment, Marcus just stood there, his rehearsed apology crumbling into impotent fury. Then he grabbed his boxes, shoving trophies inside with shaking hands. Keep the house, Andrea said as he headed for the door. I'm moving. Marcus stopped, turned back one last time. Andrea. Goodbye, Marcus. He left without another word. Andrea watched through the window as he threw the boxes in Valerie's car and peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching. Then she closed the door, locked it, and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 8 years. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. But she was standing, and she'd never felt stronger in her life. The therapist's office smelled like lavender and leather. Andrea sat in the oversized chair, her cane propped against the armrest, and tried to find a word to explain what the last month had been like. I buried my father, discovered he was a billionaire, got abandoned by my husband, and inherited an empire, Andrea finally said. Where do we even start? Dr. Patricia Chen smiled gently. Wherever you need to. So Andrea talked. About William Morrison and his double life. About Marcus's betrayal and the years she'd spent thinking she wasn't enough. About the guilt she felt for not being sadder about her marriage ending, and the grief that still came in waves when she thought about her father. I keep wondering if I'm allowed to be happy about the money, Andrea admitted. Like it's wrong to feel relieved that I don't have to worry about bills while I'm still mourning my dad. Grief and relief can coexist, Dr. Chen said. Your father wanted you to feel secure. Accepting that gift doesn't diminish your love for him. It was the first of many sessions. Twice a week, Andrea sat in that chair and slowly unpacked the weight she'd been carrying, not just from the last month, but from years of Marcus making her feel like her disability was a burden, like she should be grateful he'd stayed as long as he did. You've been taught to make yourself smaller, Dr. Chen observed during their 4th session. To apologize for taking up space. That ends now. Andrea started small. She hired a physical therapist who came to the house 3 times a week, helping her build strength she'd lost during the pregnancy. She bought a new car, one with adaptive equipment that made driving easier. She enrolled Bella in the private school she'd always dreamed of attending, with small class sizes and an art program that made her daughter's eyes light up. "Mom, they have a pottery studio," Bella exclaimed, bouncing on the couch. "An actual pottery studio. Can I really go here?" Andrea pulled her daughter close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "You can really go there. Baby, you deserve good things." "So do you," Bella said seriously, her small hand patting Andrea's rounded belly. "You and the baby." The move to Marlin Mansion happened in stages. First, Andrea visited alone, walking through the grand halls with Richard Caldwell, learning the history of the place her father had secretly owned for decades. The mansion had been closed to the public for years, maintained by a small staff who had been sworn to secrecy about the true owner. "Your father used to come here sometimes," Richard told her as they stood in the marble foyer. "Just to think," he said, "to remember where he came from and why he made the choices he did." Andrea ran her hand along the ornate banister, imagining her father in these spaces, carrying the weight of his secrets. "He really did all of this to protect me." "He loved you more than anything in this world," Richard confirmed. "Everything he did was for you." Moving day was chaotic and beautiful. Bella raced through the mansion's 55 rooms, claiming the one with a window seat overlooking the gardens as her own. Andrea's mother cried happy tears as she helped unpack boxes in the master suite. And Andrea stood in the mansion's library, walls lined with books, a fireplace big enough to stand in, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. That evening, after Bella was tucked into bed and her mother had gone home, Andrea stood in front of the full-length mirror in her new bedroom. She looked different. The grief was still there in her eyes, and probably always would be. But there was something else too. Strength, purpose, hope. Her hand rested on her pregnant belly, feeling the baby kick. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. "Better than okay." She thought about Marcus, probably in Valerie's apartment, wondering how everything had gone so wrong for him. She thought about her father, who'd planned for this moment even knowing he wouldn't be here to see it. And she thought about herself, not the broken woman Marcus had left behind, but the woman her father had always believed she could be. Andrea smiled at her reflection. For the first time in months, she recognized the person staring back. "Hello," she said softly. "Nice to finally meet you." The next morning, Andrea woke to sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked acres of manicured grounds. Bella climbed into bed beside her, chattering about the breakfast cook was making actual stuff. Andrea was still getting used to that. "Mom," Bella asked, snuggling close, "are you happy now?" Andrea kissed the top of her daughter's head. "I'm getting there, sweetheart. I'm definitely getting there." And for the first time since her father's funeral, Andrea realized it was true. The betrayal still hurt. The grief still came and went like waves. But underneath it all, she was building something new. Something strong. Something hers. She was reclaiming herself, one day at a time. And that was enough. The letter arrived 3 weeks after Andrea moved into Marlin Mansion. Cream-colored stationery, expensive paper, Andrea's name written in elegant script across the front. No return address. Andrea almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity, or maybe the need for closure, made her slide her finger under the seal. "Dear Andrea, I hope this letter finds you well. I've been thinking about you since everything happened, and I felt I owed you an explanation. What Marcus and I shared was never meant to hurt you. Sometimes people just connect in ways they can't control. I'm sure you understand. Your father must have taught you about forgiveness and grace. I've heard rumors about your inheritance. Congratulations. Your father sounds like he was an extraordinary man. I wish I could have known him. Perhaps now that some time has passed, we could meet for coffee? Woman to woman, we could clear the air. I think we have more in common than you realize. With sincere regards, Valerie." Andrea read the letter twice, her anger building with each word. The audacity, the calculated friendliness, the casual mention of her inheritance, as if Valerie had just heard about it at the salon. She called Richard Caldwell immediately. I need you to look into someone for me, Andrea said. Valerie Chen. She works at Marcus's company. I want to know everything. Richard was quiet for a moment. Andrea, are you sure? I'm sure. The report came back 2 days later. Andrea sat in her father's study, now her study, and read through the pages with growing comprehension. Valerie Chen, age 29, MBA from Georgetown, started at Marcus's marketing firm 18 months ago as a senior consultant. But before that, she'd worked at Morrison Industries' corporate office in Oklahoma City. Andrea's blood ran cold. She kept reading. Valerie had been terminated from Morrison Industries after only 6 months, officially for restructuring. But the notes Richard had obtained suggested something else. She'd been asking too many questions about William Morrison, about the ownership structure, about succession plans, about Andrea. She knew, Andrea whispered, the pieces falling into place. She knew about Dad before any of this happened. Richard had included a timeline. Valerie was fired from Morrison Industries in March 2 years ago. She started working at Marcus's firm in June. Started attending company events where she would have met Andrea. Started her affair with Marcus shortly after Andrea's father was diagnosed with heart disease last fall. Andrea pulled out her phone and scrolled back through old photos. There, the company Christmas party. Marcus had his arm around Andrea, both of them smiling. And in the background, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, Valerie, watching them, her expression calculating even in that casual snapshot. The letter from Valerie sat on the desk, its fake warmth now feeling sinister. I wish I could have known him. She'd tried. She'd worked at his company, dug into his life, and when that failed, she targeted his daughter through the weakest link, Marcus. Andrea thought about the timing. Valerie pursuing Marcus while Andrea's father was sick. The affair intensifying as William's health declined. Marcus's sudden distance right when Andrea needed him most. And then, just days after the funeral, Marcus leaving, probably encouraged by Valerie, who thought she was securing access to a grieving widow who'd be too broken to fight back. They'd underestimated her. Both of them. More than that, they'd underestimated William Morrison. He'd structured the trust specifically to protect against people like Valerie. The inheritance was Andrea's alone, untouchable by spouses, creditors, or gold diggers who thought they could manipulate their way into it. Her father had seen this coming. Maybe not Valerie specifically, but people like her, people who'd smell money and circle like vultures. Andrea picked up a phone and found Marcus's number. She typed out a message. Tell Valerie she wasted her time. The inheritance is mine alone. The trust is ironclad. She gets nothing. You get nothing. And I know everything. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she picked up Valerie's letter, with its fake concern and transparent manipulation, and walked to the mansion's grand fireplace. The staff had lit it that morning, flames crackling cheerfully against the October chill. Andrea held the letter over the fire, watching the edges curl and blacken. You don't get to rewrite this story, she said to the burning paper. You don't get pretend you're a victim or a friend. You're just someone who tried to use me and failed. The letter caught fully, flames consuming Valerie's elegant handwriting, her calculated words, her pathetic attempt to still somehow gain access to Andrea's life. Andrea watched until there was nothing left but ash. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, how did you? Andrea blocked the number without reading the rest. Then she blocked Valerie's number too, which had been saved in her contact from some company event years ago. She didn't need explanations or apologies or confrontations. She didn't need to understand why they'd done it or make them feel guilty. She just needed them gone. Andrea turned away from the fireplace, her reflection catching in the window. Outside, the mansion's grounds stretched into the distance, golden in the afternoon light. This was her home now, her legacy, her future, and there was no room in it for people who saw her as a means to an end. Goodbye, Andrea said to the ashes in the fireplace, to Marcus and Valerie, to the woman she used to be who would have tried to understand, to forgive, to make peace. That woman was gone too, and Andrea had never felt more free. Andrea stood in the grand ballroom of Marlin Mansion, architect's blueprint spread across a folding table, her hand resting on her very pregnant belly. The baby kicked, as if approving of the plans taking shape. So you want to convert the East Wing into transitional housing. The architect, a woman named Sarah Kim, traced a finger along the drawings. That's ambitious. My father built his wealth on integrity, Andrea said. He lived modestly so I could learn what really mattered. Now I want to use what he left me to help other women rebuild their lives. The Morrison Foundation, as she decided to call it, would provide temporary housing and resources for women leaving abusive relationships, women rebuilding after loss, women who, like Andrea, needed a safe place to rediscover their strength. The West Wing stays residential for my family, Andrea continued. But the rest of this mansion? It's too big for just us. My father kept it empty for years. I want it full of life again, full of hope. Sarah smiled. Your father would be proud. The foundation's first resident arrived in November. Her name was Jessica, 26 years old, with 2 small children and a black eye that was fading to yellow-green. She stood in the mansion's foyer, looking overwhelmed and frightened. I can't afford this, Jessica whispered. I don't have. It's free, Andrea said gently, taking her hand. For as long as you need. We have counselors, childcare, job training, legal services. Everything you need to build a new life. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Why would you do this for strangers? Andrea thought about Marcus's text, about standing in that grocery store feeling helpless and broken. Because someone did it for me. My father gave me a safety net when I didn't know I'd need one. Now I'm passing it forward. By December, the foundation housed 8 women and their children. Andrea met with each of them weekly, sharing her own story of betrayal and rebuilding. She wasn't their savior. She was clear about that. She was just someone further along the same path, reaching back to help others climb. You left him, a woman named Tamara asked during one of their group sessions. Even though you were pregnant and disabled, weren't you scared? Terrified, Andrea admitted. But I was more scared of teaching my daughter that women should accept betrayal and disrespect. More scared of raising my son to think that's how you treat people you claim to love. She'd found out she was having a boy. William, she'd decided. After her father. My dad taught me that real wealth isn't money, Andrea continued. It's knowing your worth. It's having integrity. It's building something that matters more than balance sheets and bank accounts. She looked around the circle, women in various stages of healing, some still wearing the haunted look of fresh trauma, others beginning to smile again. We're all wealthy in the ways that count, Andrea said. We're survivors. We're mothers. We're fighters. And we're not doing this alone anymore. Bella had taken to the foundation's children like a protective big sister. Andrea often found her in the mansion converted playroom, reading to the younger kids or helping them with homework. Mom, Bella said one evening as Andrea tucked her into bed, are you happy now? Like, really happy? Andrea considered the question. She was 9 months pregnant, single, still grieving her father, navigating a new life she'd never expected. But she was also free, purposeful, surrounded by women who lifted each other up instead of tearing each other down. Yeah, baby, Andrea said, kissing her daughter's forehead. I really am. Good, because you're like a superhero now. You help people. Andrea laughed. I'm not a superhero, Bella. I'm just. You left Dad when he was mean. You took Grandpa's money and made it into something good. You help moms who are sad become happy again. Bella looked at her seriously. That's what superheroes do, Mom. Later that night, Andrea stood at the window of her study, looking out over the mansion grounds. Lights glowed in the east wing windows, women and children who now had a safe place to sleep, to heal, to dream about their futures. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Chen. Proud of you. You've come so far. Andrea smiled. She had come far. From that broken woman in the grocery store to this, a mother, a philanthropist, a leader creating change. Marcus had tried to make her feel small, worthless, disposable. Valerie had tried to use her as a stepping stone to wealth. But Andrea had taken every blow they dealt and transformed it into something beautiful. She'd turned her pain into purpose, her inheritance into impact, her father's legacy into a living testament to the values it instilled in her. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling little William kick. "Your grandfather was an extraordinary man," she whispered. "And I'm going to make sure you grow up knowing that real power isn't about money or control. It's about lifting others up. It's about integrity. It's about love." Behind her, the mansion hummed with life. Children laughing, women talking, a community forming from the ashes of her father's secret and her own suffering. Andrea had found her strength, and she was just getting started. The first snow of winter fell on the day Andrea went into labor. She'd been standing in the mansion's conservatory, approving plans for the foundation's spring expansion, when the contraction started. Bella held her hand in the car, chattering nervously about baby names while Andrea breathed through the pain. "What if he comes out looking like Dad?" Bella asked quietly as they pulled up to the hospital. Andrea squeezed her daughter's hand. "Then he'll look like Dad. And that's okay. We can love people and still know they made terrible choices. Your brother isn't responsible for what your father did." Bella nodded, seeming to understand in that wise way children sometimes do. William Marcus Morrison. She'd kept Marcus's name as a middle name, if only so her son would know where he came from. Was born at 3:47 a.m., healthy and screaming with all the fury of new life. Andrea held him against her chest, tears streaming down her face, and felt her father's presence so strongly it took her breath away. "Hi, baby," she whispered. "Your grandpa would have loved you so much." Spring came to Marlin Mansion like a promise kept. The foundation now housed 15 families. Andrea had hired a full staff, counselors, teachers, legal advocates, medical professionals, all working to help women rebuild their lives. The West Lawn had been converted into a community garden where residents grew vegetables and flowers, their hands in the soil bringing something beautiful from nothing. Andrea walked through the grounds with baby William strapped to her chest, Bella skipping ahead to show her the tulips that had just bloomed. The physical therapy had worked wonders. Her cane was now more a precaution than a necessity. She felt stronger than she had in years. Mom, look," Bella called, pointing to a bench that had just been installed near the garden. A bronze plaque gleamed in the morning sun. Andrea walked closer, her breath catching as she read the inscription. "William Morrison. Real wealth is measured not by what we keep, but by what we give." Richard Caldwell had arranged it as a surprise, a memorial to the man who'd built an empire in secret and used it to change his daughter's life. Andrea sat on the bench, adjusting William in the carrier, and looked out over the mansion grounds. Women worked in the garden. Children played on the new playground. Counselors led therapy groups under the old oak trees. Life, hope, transformation. This was a father's true legacy. Not the billions in the bank or the mansion's 55 rooms, but the understanding that wealth meant nothing if you didn't use it to lift others up. "Do you miss Grandpa?" Bella asked, sitting beside her. "Every single day," Andrea said honestly. "But I feel him here. In this place. In the work we're doing. In you and your brother." "Do you miss Dad?" Andrea considered the question carefully. "I miss who I thought he was. But I don't miss who he actually turned out to be. Does that make sense?" Bella nodded. "He called last week. Grandma told me." Andrea's mother had been fielding Marcus's increasingly desperate attempts at contact. Apparently, Valerie had left him once she realized there was no money to be gained. Now Marcus was alone, making half-hearted attempts at reconciliation that Andrea ignored completely. "Do you want to talk to him?" Andrea asked gently. "Maybe someday," Bella said, "but not yet. Right now I just want to be here, with you and William and all the people we're helping." Andrea pulled her daughter close, kissing the top of her head, 8 years old and already wiser than most adults. That evening, after the children were asleep, Andrea stood in her father's study, the room where she'd first opened an envelope and discovered the truth. She kept it mostly unchanged, his worn Bible still on the desk, his reading glasses beside it, the faint smell of Old Spice that hadn't quite faded. She pulled out the original letter he'd written, the one that had started everything, and read it again. "Be strong, my girl, stronger than you've ever been. The world will change around you now, but don't let it change who you are." "I didn't let it change me, Daddy," Andrea whispered. "I let it reveal me." She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, broken, grieving, convinced she was too damaged to deserve love or happiness. That woman had believed Marcus when he said she was a burden, had accepted his betrayal as somehow inevitable, as if a disability made her unworthy of faithfulness. But that woman was gone. In her place stood someone her father would recognize, strong, compassionate, purposeful, someone who'd taken unimaginable pain and transformed it into a foundation that would help hundreds of women reclaim their own strength. Andrea walked to the window, looking out over the mansion grounds bathed in moonlight. Tomorrow, 3 new families would arrive. Next month, they'd break ground on an additional wing. Next year, they'd open a second location. The work would never be finished. There would always be more women who needed help, more children who needed safety, more families rebuilding from the wreckage of betrayal and abuse. And Andrea would be there for all of them, not because she had to, not because the money demanded it, but because she'd walked that path herself and knew how desperately you needed someone to reach back and pull you forward. Behind her, she heard Bella padding down the hallway, probably sneaking to check on her baby brother one more time before bed. The sound of her daughter's footsteps, confident, happy, safe, was worth more than all the billions her father had left her. Andrea smiled, placing her hand against the window glass. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered to the night, to the grounds, to the legacy her father had entrusted to her. "For everything. For the money, yes, but mostly for teaching me that my worth was never about what anyone else thought of me. It was always about who I chose to be." A shooting star streaked across the sky, bright, brief, beautiful. Andrea took it as a sign it was meant to be. Her father was still watching over her, still proud, still loving her from whatever place good men go when their work on earth is done. And Andrea? She was just getting started. She turned from the window, ready to check on her sleeping children, ready to rest before another day of building something meaningful, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The mansion's lights glowed warm against the darkness. Inside its walls, women were learning to dream again. Children were learning they were safe. And Andrea Smith, daughter, mother, survivor, philanthropist, was living proof that the end of one story could be the beginning of something extraordinary. She'd been broken. She'd been betrayed. She'd been left behind. But she had risen. And in rising, she'd lifted others with her. That was her father's true gift. Not the money, not the mansion, but the understanding that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up and reaching out your hand to help someone else rise too. Andrea walked down the hallway toward her children's rooms, her steps steady, her heart full, her future bright with possibility. The story of the woman abandoned by her husband while grieving her father was over. The story of the woman who transformed that pain into purpose. That story was just beginning. And it was going to be beautiful. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year in advance. What happens next is unbelievable. The next story is even crazier, darker, and more gripping than this one. Tap the image on your screen now and don't miss it.